Wireless LAN Security, Part 1. Now in this video we're going to kick things off by learning about the vulnerabilities of the Wired Equivalent Privacy, or WEP, method for encrypting data on a wireless LAN. It is very vulnerable, and we'll learn about the ins and outs of WEP in this video. And then we'll learn about methods for filtering access to our wireless LAN and typical wireless attacks that can be mounted against our wireless LAN. So basically in this Security Part 1 video we're going to learn about the wireless LAN security problems, and then in Part 2 we'll learn about some of the solutions to these problems. So put your wireless party hat on, because we're going to have some fun with WEP. So in our previous videos we've learned some of the basics of WEP, and just a little quick refresher of that before we move forward here is that WEP is an encryption algorithm that's used either for shared authentication, and remember that shared authentication with WEP is used to verify the identity of the wireless station, and it can also be used for encrypting the wireless data, and shared authentication and encrypting the data can be used in conjunction or separately. Now the actual encryption algorithm that's used by WEP is named RC4, and there's a couple of problems with using RC4 for WEP encryption. Number one, the source code is freely available on the internet. And number two, because the source code has been made available, developers, hackers, black hats, call them what you like, have been able to create applications that can break the RC4 encryption due to weak keys that are involved with WEP and RC4. Now, to understand why WEP is vulnerable because of RC4 encryption using weak keys, we need to know a little bit about RC4 and how the WEP encryption process actually takes place. Now first off, RC4 uses what's referred to as the exclusive OR or XOR function in combination with a cipher key to encrypt data. Now exclusive OR, or just XOR, is a mathematical function used with binary numbers. Binary numbers meaning zeros and ones. So what happens is, in the XOR process, if the bits are the same, the result of the XOR is 0. If the bits are different, the results of the XOR is 1. Now the cipher key that is used by WEP is a combination of a static element and a dynamic element. Let's bring up another whiteboard and learn about these two elements. Now the static value is a value that we've actually already learned about. This value is a shared secret key. It's the shared secret key that you enter into the wireless station and the wireless access point, and the length of this key can either be 40 bits or 104 bits. And this is an alphanumeric value. And this alphanumeric value is entered in wireless access points and wireless stations either as a hexadecimal value or as a ASCII plaintext value. So if a 40-bit shared secret key will be implemented on the wireless access point, that can be entered in either by using 10 hexadecimal characters or 5 ASCII plaintext characters. In contrast, if a 104-bit value is required, that would be entered in by using 26 hexadecimal characters or 13 plaintext ASCII characters. Now the dynamic element of the RC4 cipher key is called the initialization vector, or IV for short. And it's dynamic because it's always changing. Now the length of the key is 24 bits. It's an alphanumeric value. And oftentimes when you're looking at purchasing wireless network equipment, you'll see on the box it'll have these specifications of WEP, and it'll typically say allows for 64-bit or 128-bit WEP encryption. But you might be scratching your head saying, Todd, you just talked about 40-bit and 104-bit up here. Well, what happens is this initialization vector, or IV, is pre-appended, meaning it's added to the beginning of the shared secret key. And by doing that, you yield a key length of 64-bit or 128-bit. So when we add 24 to 40, we get 64. When we add 24 to 104, we get 128-bit key length. And the end result of combining the shared key with the initialization vector is referred to simply as the WEP key. So with that background, let's bring up an illustration of the WEP encryption process. Let's follow the WEP encryption process bouncing ball. So first off, the plaintext message is run through an integrity check algorithm, and that produces what's referred to as an integrity check value, or ICV. And this value is appended to the end of the original plaintext message. And then what happens next is that the station generates an IV. and that IV is pre-appended to the shared key, and then that value is run through the RC4 algorithm, which is called the RC4 key scheduling algorithm. And the result of running this value through the algorithm is called a seed value. And that seed value is then run through the PRNG, or what's referred to as the pseudo-random number generator. And then the pseudo-random number generator produces what is referred to as the cipher key, or the cipher stream. And then what happens here at this point is that the station uses RC4 to XOR the cipher key with the data frame to produce an encrypted data frame. And then lastly, the encrypted data frame, which is also referred to as ciphertext, cipher meaning that the data has simply been encrypted, is pre-appended with the IV. And a new IV is used for each encrypted frame that is sent. So on the surface, this seems to be pretty secure. To ensure that the cipher key is statistically random, what happens is that the seed value, again, is fed through the PRNG to create a cipher key that, again, is XOR'd against the plain text message to generate the ciphertext, or the encrypted data here. So now you might be asking yourself, okay, so what's the problem with WEP? Well, the main problem with WEP is the potential for the reuse of the IVs. And you're probably saying now, reuse of IVs. Well, didn't you just say a second ago that the IV is dynamically changed for each frame that's sent out? Well, yes, that's true, but remember that the IV is 24 bits in length, which gives you a possible combination of 16,777,216 possible IVs. And even though on the surface a combination of 16 million some odd different IVs sounds a lot, it can actually be exhausted pretty quickly on a busy network in just a matter of a few hours. And what happens is, once an attacker has collected enough frames, so they're just sitting out there with a laptop somewhere, maybe in their car, using the wireless sniffer, and once they've collected enough frames, they'll eventually get some duplicate IVs. And once they have the duplicate IVs, they can then use that information using free software to actually find out what the shared secret key is. So again, just to spell that out, is what happens is when the wireless client begins transmitting the encrypted frames, it increments the IV by 1 for each subsequent frame. And on a busy network, statistically, it's possible for all the IVs, the 16 million plus combinations of the IVs, to be exhausted in 5 hours. And that would mean that the IV would be reinitialized back to the starting point at least every 5 hours. Also, to add insult to injury, when WEP is used, the IV is transmitted in the clear with each encrypted packet, so the IV is not actually encrypted. So due to this weakness, there are several WEP attacks that can be mounted against our wireless network. Let's bring up our whiteboard and learn about those. Some active WEP attacks are to simply inject new traffic into the wireless network. We can use software to take plain text packet and inject it into the wireless network without the knowledge of the WEP key. And then what happens is the receiving stations accept the packet as if the sender had used the correct key to encrypt the packet. And there are also software applications that allow an attacker to decrypt individual packets without the knowledge of the WEP key versus the entire packet stream that you've sniffed. And there's also tools that allow an attacker to capture a packet and to re-inject it back into the network. And this is called a replay attack. And unfortunately, no wireless networks based on WEP provide any protection against replay attacks. And as I mentioned a minute ago, once an attacker has collected enough frames that include the duplicate IVs, they can use software to actually find out what the shared secret key is. And this is typically referred to as WEP cracking, or a dictionary attack. And if an attacker has the shared secret key, well, they've got the goose that laid the golden egg. They have access to your entire wireless network, which obviously is not a good thing. Now, historically, WEP cracking software would take a long time to find out what the shared secret key is, and you would have to capture anywhere between 5 to 10 million packets, depending on the level of encryption that's being used, either 64-bit or 128-bit. And in order to capture that much traffic, it would take gigabytes of hard disk space to store the captured traffic. So the two essentials to WEP cracking are to be able to capture enough of the IVs, and number two, to have the software to be able to derive what the key is. Well, there's a new breed of tools out there that make this process a real trivial matter. There's software out there now that allows you to capture enough IVs in a matter of minutes versus hours. So you can use software to artificially create a very busy wireless network. And then once you've created that busy wireless network, and you can use software to capture the IVs, and now with the new web cracking software, you need fewer IVs. You can actually capture anywhere between 500,000 to 1 million frames, and from that be able to derive what the shared secret key is. So it used to take 5 or more hours to derive what the shared secret key is. Now has been reduced to about 10 minutes. And let me show you an abridged example of this. So the very first step is to find a busy wireless network, or to use applications to generate traffic on a wireless network so you can capture enough IVs. Once you've found a wireless network that has a lot of wireless traffic, you can use an application such as AeroDump to capture the traffic on the wireless network. And then once enough of that traffic has been captured, remember you only need about 500,000 to 1 million IVs, then you can save that to a capture file. Once you have that capture file, then you can import that capture file into a web cracking program such as this one right here, AirCrack. And look what AirCrack was able to do. It was able to derive the shared secret key for a particular wireless network in 3 minutes and 33 seconds. That's right. That's not 3 hours. That is 3 minutes and 33 seconds. Oh my gosh, WEP is dead. Pretty amazing to say the least. Now, just for your information, I cracked my own wireless network. I didn't crack my neighbor's wireless network or a company down the road or anything like that. It is my wireless network. I can hear you saying, yeah, sure. You got to trust me on this. Now, the key that I found is represented in hexadecimal digits, hexadecimal alphanumeric characters, and we have 26 characters in total, which means what level of encryption is being used for the shared secret key? Anybody? That's right, we have a 104-bit length shared secret key, and when you combine that with the IV of 24 bits, we have 128-bit encryption, which was broken in 3 minutes and 33 seconds. And again, if you're using a 40-bit shared secret key, that is actually concatenated with the initialization vector to provide 64-bit level of encryption. And when WEP encryption is being used, either 64-bit or 128-bit, what is actually being encrypted is just the data and the data alone. So now you might be scratching your head and ask yourself, well, why in the world was WEP implemented in the 802.11 standard? Let's bring up a whiteboard and talk about that. The 802.11 standard specifies that this criteria be used for security on a wireless LAN. Well, WEP meets all of these requirements, all this criteria. Also, the 802.11 standard states that WEP provides for protection from casual eavesdropping, which it does. And the main driving force behind using WEP was simply for ensuring privacy versus all-encompassing and all-reaching security for a wireless LAN. And also, it really has only been in the past couple of years that the true weaknesses of WEP have become apparent to the information technology community. And it's only been very recent that these new and improved WEP cracking tools have become available. Now, in addition to using WEP to provide a basic level of security for your wireless LAN, we can also use 3 types of filtering methods in conjunction with WEP to provide a little more security. Let's bring up a whiteboard and learn about those filtering methods. So to enhance the security of our wireless LAN, we can implement SSID filtering, MAC address filtering, and protocol filtering. And let's learn about these 3 different filter types individually, first starting with SSID. And let's bring up another whiteboard to learn about SSID filtering. Now, as we all know, the SSID is the name of the wireless network. And a wireless access point is typically configured as a default to broadcast the name of the SSID within a beacon frame. And the broadcasting of the SSID makes it easier for stations to find the wireless network and potentially to connect to the wireless network if you're using open system authentication. However, this can also open the door for casual eavesdroppers to drop into your wireless network as well, which is not a good thing. So one of the very first things you want to do as an administrator when you're configuring your wireless access point is to take the SSID out of the beacon frame by disabling the broadcasting of the SSID. And once the access point has been configured to no longer broadcast the SSID, you now have what is referred to as a closed system. And on a consumer-grade access point, you can disable the broadcasting of the SSID simply by looking for the option of disable broadcasting of SSID. However, on enterprise-grade access points, you disable the broadcasting of the SSID by looking for an option called closed system. Now, by creating a closed system, this is actually step one in the SSID filtering process. The second step would be to then configure the wireless stations with the name of the SSID. So because it's not being broadcast anymore, the stations aren't going to be able to hear that in the beacon frame because it's no longer announced in the beacon frame. So in order for the stations to connect to and associate with your access point, you have to configure them with the name of the wireless network. And the name of the SSID is typically configured on a station, but that's not always the case. In an unsecured network that is using open system authentication, that is broadcasting the name of the SSID, and is not using WEP for encrypting the data, all a station would have to do to associate with that access point that's configured that way is simply find in the wireless interface that broadcasting SSID, and in most cases just double-click on it to start the connection and association process. So in those situations, the wireless station wouldn't have to be configured with the SSID in order to connect to the wireless access point that it doesn't have any security. So again, we want to disable the broadcasting of the SSID and then configure the wireless stations with the name of the SSID that is no longer being broadcast. Now step two is to change the default name of the SSID. Now that it's not being broadcast, that's still not enough. So even if the SSID is no longer being broadcast, what a hacker could do is go through a list of default SSIDs, configure their wireless station with the default SSID to see if they get a match with your wireless access point that is in range of the hacker. And there are many websites that make available the default SSIDs for most wireless access points. Let me show you one such website. So it's saying, hey, for these 15 wireless access point vendors, we have the default SSIDs. So if we look at Linksys, saying for this particular product, this is the default SSID, simply Linksys. And let's take a look at another one. How about D-Link? So again, for this particular product right here, this is the default SSID. So what a hacker can do is simply go through this list. They can configure the wireless station with Linksys, Wireless LAN, etc., etc. Just keep going through this list until they hopefully hit one. So the next step then is, after you've disabled the broadcasting of the SSID, is to change the default of name of the SSID, but make sure that you don't change the SSID to your company name. Meaning that you don't want the name of the SSID to be something so obvious. So if the name of your company is ABC Incorporated, a hacker might try ABC or ABC Inc. or something like that as the name of the SSID. So you want to make it something meaningful but not completely obvious. And then lastly, you don't want to use SID filtering as your only means to secure your wireless LAN, which I've seen some people do, where they disable the broadcasting of the SSID, they change the default name to something that's meaningful, and then that's it. They don't use WEP or any other means of security. Not a good thing. So those are the 1, 2, 3s of the SID filtering method. Let me show you how you disable the broadcasting of the SSID on two different access points. First, let me show you a professional grade access point, my Proxima access point. And in this particular one, go to the Interfaces tab, and then we go to the Wireless tab. And if we scroll down here, we see the option Enable Closed System. And because this is enabled, that prevents the SSID from being broadcast. Now, if we go to my consumer grade access point, which is my Linksys access point, the option to disable the SSID from being broadcast is pretty apparent here. Wireless SSID broadcast, either enable it or disable it. And now let's learn about our next type of filtering, which is MAC address filtering. And to learn about that, we'll bring up another whiteboard. So the basic idea of MAC address filtering is that we can either allow or deny a wireless station from associating with an access point by creating a filter list on the access point which lists the MAC addresses of the wireless stations that are either allowed or denied the ability to associate with an access point. Now, on the surface, MAC address filtering sounds pretty secure, but unfortunately, when you dig a little deeper, MAC address filtering can be circumvented relatively easily. And the reason for this is that an attacker can sniff out the source and destination MAC address, meaning the MAC address of the wireless station and the access point, because the MAC address is sent in the clear. It is not encrypted even if you're using WEP. Again, WEP only encrypts the data. It will not encrypt the MAC address. So, once an attacker has got a list of MAC addresses on your wireless network, so they've got a list of the wireless stations that are associated with a wireless access point, what they can do is then take one of those MAC addresses and change the MAC address of their wireless station to the MAC address of one of the stations that they had sniffed out. So there are some wireless network adapters that allow you to change their MAC address, typically through the software that comes with the driver for the wireless network adapter. Let me show you an example of this. So if we open up the Network Connections folder, go to the Properties of the Network Connection by choosing Properties from the menu, and let's go to the Properties of the Wireless Network Adapter by clicking on the Configure button. And then from here we click on the Advanced tab, and if you notice there's an option here named Network Address. Using the network address option, I could type in the MAC address of one of the wireless stations that I had sniffed out using the protocol analyzer. Now, two wireless stations using the same MAC address cannot connect to the wireless network simultaneously. So what an attacker will typically do is wait for after hours, use one of the valid MAC addresses that is on the MAC address filter list of an access point, enter in that MAC address in a property such as we see right here to gain access to the wireless network, maybe at 9 o'clock at night. They're out in the parking lot, camped out there in a van with their laptop, so on and so forth. So not a good thing. So using a MAC address filter list to secure a corporate wireless network certainly is not a secure method of providing security for your wireless LAN at all. However, for a little home network, it might be adequate. Let me show you on my consumer-grade Linksys access point how we would create a MAC address filter list. Let me bring that up right now. So you would look on your wireless access point for an option that says MAC filter or something like that. And this particular access point says wireless MAC filter. Once we enable the option, we have the option to create a filter list that will either prevent the MAC addresses that are in the list from associating with the wireless access point, or permit only the MAC addresses that are on the list from to associate with the wireless access point. And to actually create the MAC address filter list, we would just click on the button here, Edit MAC Filter List, then enter in the MAC addresses that you would like to either allow or deny access to your wireless access point. So let's close out of here, go back to our whiteboard now. Now, a third method of filtering is protocol filtering. Let's bring up another whiteboard and learn about protocol filtering. And now let's learn about our third type of filtering, which is protocol filtering. And to do that, let's bring up another whiteboard. Now, some access points provide the ability to either block or allow specific types of network traffic such as SMTP or FTP or POP3 or HTTP as an example. And protocol filtering is often used to allow guest access to your wireless network so they can connect to the internet, but not to your company file server. So, for example, a protocol filter on an enterprise wireless gateway for guest access would just allow the protocols of HTTP, HTTPS, maybe FTP, but nothing else. And by filtering out the protocols that are not needed and allowing the protocols that are only required for the degree of connectivity that is allowed, this also provides a level of security and also helps to control the utilization of the medium. With less protocols, there's less bandwidth that is being consumed. If you have more protocols, that's consuming more bandwidth. Also, by permitting only the protocols that are required for the level of connectivity that's used on the wireless network, this also provides a degree of security and also helps to control utilization on the wireless medium as well. If we restrict the access point to allow only specific types of network traffic to pass, then this reduces the potential for the medium to be consumed, the bandwidth of the medium to be consumed by a floodgate of other protocols. Now let's take a look at an example of enabling a protocol filter list using the Proxima wireless access point. So let's bring that up right now. So from here we'd go to the filtering tab, and then from the filtering tab we would click on the Ethernet protocol tab, and then we can either block the protocols or allow them to pass through, essentially meaning allow. So we can either allow or deny. And then if we scroll down here, we see a pre-populated protocol filter list, and right now these entries on this filter list, these protocol entries on the filter list are disabled. But if we were to click on the edit button, we can create additional protocols, add additional protocols to this filter list, or enable the protocol. So if I were to choose enable, that means that this particular protocol would now be blocked. Also, something else I'd like to point out is that the format of the protocol number is in hexadecimal. Also, this is not to be confused with port forwarding that you would configure on a firewall. With port forwarding, you would allow or deny certain ports to be accessed from an external resource, such as on the Internet. So if there's an application that's on the Internet that wants to have access to an application that's hosted on your server internally, you can enable a port forwarding functionality on your firewall to allow requests to a certain port number and its associated protocol to pass through the firewall. This is not the case. We're just filtering out the protocols that can be used or not used within the internal wireless network. And with that, let's finish up by summarizing the different type of attacks that can be mounted against a wireless LAN. And to do that, let's bring up another whiteboard here. Now, the type of attacks that occur on wireless LANs fit into these four categories here: passive, active, jamming, and man-in-the-middle attacks. Of the four, passive is probably the easiest and the most common type of attack. By passive, I mean that the attacker is using a protocol analyzer to capture packets on your wireless network, and because it's all done wirelessly, they're not going to leave any trace of what they've done whatsoever, because they don't have to connect directly to an access point. They're just sitting within broadcast range of that access point, and because all this is traveling through the air, and a lot of this is traveling through the air unencrypted, such as we've learned in a lot of these beacon frames in the past couple of videos, an attacker can capture a lot of information about your network through this passive attack just by capturing these packets that flow between the wireless stations and the access point. So again, such a passive attack leaves no trace or no evidence that a person was capturing packets with the protocol analyzer, and this allows that attacker to be able to listen to and capture all this information, which they can then take back to some other location away from your network and do some analysis on what they've captured and potentially get the web shared secret key. And once an attacker has performed a passive offline attack to find out what the shared secret key is to your wireless network that is using WEP for shared authentication, then they can gain access to your network using that shared secret key that they were able to derive by using the free software that I showed you just a few minutes ago. And at that point, they can then mount active attacks to gain access to servers in your network and then have lots of fun. Try to look for valuable data such as customer lists or trade secrets or marketing and sales information, or just potentially hijack your internet access, or just simply gain access to your network to use your internet access for malicious purposes, such as the potential to use your company email servers to send spam messages. And the list goes on. Once the wireless station that the attacker is using is a wireless station that has been associated and authenticated on that wireless LAN, they might as well be sitting in a cubicle inside your company walls, because that's where they are. They are inside your company walls as far as the network is concerned. Now, our third type of attack, jamming, really is not that common at all. The basics behind a jamming attack is that a person uses a very high-powered radio frequency signal generator and broadcasts that signal in the proximity of your wireless access point. And by doing that, it cuts off the signal between the wireless access points and the wireless stations, and in effect brings down your wireless network. An intentional jamming attack such as this really is not that common because it doesn't yield anything for the attacker. They don't derive anything. They don't get anything on your network. The only thing that they actually derive is shutting down your network, your wireless network, probably for a short period of time, which will affect your productivity in the company, but that's about it. Now, what is probably a little more common is the unintentional jamming or regular interference of your wireless network due to other wireless devices, other wireless transmitting devices, communication towers, radio towers, microwave towers, or just simply a large number of wireless devices such as cordless phones, baby monitors, microwave ovens, devices that operate on the same frequency as your wireless LAN. Now, another type of attack, which is not very common but can have devastating consequences, is the man-in-the-middle attack. To learn more about this type of attack, let's bring up an illustration of the attack. So a common type of man-in-the-middle attack is that we first start out with an authorized wireless station on our company wireless network, which we have over here, that is connected to a wireless access point on our company's wireless LAN. And then an attacker will sit back with a wireless protocol analyzer and sniff out packets to obtain the IP address of both the wireless station and the wireless access point, the association ID, and the SSID that is configured on the access point. An attacker can then take that information and configure a rogue access point on a different radio channel and place that rogue access point closer to the wireless station than the company wireless access point. And because the rogue access point is now physically closer to the wireless station, the rogue access point will have a stronger signal strength that is emitting from the beacons that it sends out, which the wireless station will listen to. It's always listening to in the background these beacons that are sent out. And eventually it's going to pick up on the fact that, hey, there's an access point here that has a stronger signal strength than the one that I'm associated with currently. So as a result, the station will disassociate itself from the company access point and associate itself with the rogue access point that has the higher signal strength. Now, this rogue access point will typically be a laptop that is configured with 2 wireless network adapters. And there's free applications out on the internet that allows you to convert your wireless station, this laptop right here, aka the Rogue AP, into an access point. So you can allow your laptop to function as an access point. So once this station has effectively associated with and connected to your laptop, then you can run a whole bunch of hacking utilities from your laptop against this laptop over here, this station, and try to get sensitive information such as usernames and passwords and all sorts of fun things. Now, in order to mount a man-in-the-middle attack, the attacker would typically have to be within the company walls, in the company premises. So really the best measure against a man-in-the-middle attack is to ensure physical security of your company as much as possible. And with that brings us to the end. Let's bring up a whiteboard and do a quick review of what we've learned here. So we started this video off by learning about the static and dynamic elements that comprise a WEP key, and we learned about the WEP encryption process. And through that process, we learned that WEP has a weak implementation of the 24-bit initialization vector, or IV for short. And as a result of this weak implementation, an offline dictionary attack can be used to determine what the shared secret key is. And we also learned about the 3 filtering methods that can be used on a wireless network, which are MAC address filtering, SSID filtering, and protocol filtering. And unfortunately, the MAC address is sent in the clear, and as a result, an attack can be used to circumvent MAC filters. And remember to disable your SSID broadcast and to change the default SSID to something that is nondescript. And we also learned that protocol filters can be used to provide a degree of security and also to help control the utilization of the wireless medium. And then we finished off by learning about the typical attacks that can occur on a wireless LAN, which are passive, active, jamming, and man-in-the-middle attacks. And with that brings us to the end. I hope that this video has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.